Tonight, you're about to hear 5 of the most chilling encounters ever reported on the open sea. These aren't ghost stories passed around a campfire. Every account you'll hear has been carefully cross-checked from real testimonies, forums, and Reddit threads where survivors swore they'd never speak of them again. Imagine yourself on a luxury cruise, the laughter of strangers echoing down polished corridors, when suddenly you realize you're not alone, and what's following you was never supposed to be on board. Welcome to Midnight Outcry. Dim the lights, make sure you're alone, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, press the bell icon so you never miss a night of terror, and don't forget to share your own thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be next. Story 1. It was the kind of sound that doesn't just wake you, it pierces through your chest like a warning. My cabin phone rang at exactly 3 a.m. A shrill metallic ring that felt louder than it should have in the quiet of the ship. At first, I thought it was some sort of mistake, a glitch in the system maybe, but when I picked it up, I didn't hear silence, and I didn't hear a stranger. I heard my own voice. It was unmistakable, same timbre, same subtle rasp I'd always hated about recordings of myself. And the voice on the other end said just 6 words, firm and cold. Don't open your cabin door, ever. I dropped the receiver so hard it bounced against the desk. My hands shook, my stomach knotted. I was wide awake, every nerve on fire. My name is Michael Grant. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a claims adjuster for an insurance company in Pittsburgh. Boring job, boring life. After a bitter divorce last year, I decided I needed a break from staring at spreadsheets in a quiet apartment that still smelled faintly like my ex's perfume. A coworker had suggested a cruise. "It'll reset your brain, man," he said. "Ocean air, buffets, no stress." So, against my usual cautious penny-pinching nature, I booked a week-long Caribbean cruise. I wasn't the cruise type. I'd never even been on a ship before. But the glossy brochure made it look like a floating city of neon lights, endless food, and happy strangers. I convinced myself it would be therapeutic. The first day was normal. I boarded with the crowd, admired the ship's massive decks, the endless expanse of sea. My cabin was on deck 7, small but clean, with a round porthole window that looked straight into the ocean. I remember thinking how comforting the steady hum of the engines was. Like white noise to drown out the memories I didn't want to sit with anymore. I kept mostly to myself. I had dinner in the buffet, took a stroll along the promenade, and even tried a trivia game in the lounge before retreating to my cabin around midnight. I was asleep within an hour. And then came that call. When I finally dared to pick up the receiver again, there was only static. I sat there, the phone trembling in my hand, listening to the faint hiss as though something might speak again. My reflection in the dark window seemed to lean closer, like it was waiting. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a prank? Maybe the phone lines had some crossed wires, and I'd imagined the similarity to my voice? But deep down, I knew it wasn't a mistake. It was too precise, too intentional. I didn't sleep again that night. Every small sound outside my cabin door, the shuffle of feet, the distant clank of a cart, felt amplified, like someone was waiting just beyond the threshold. By the time the first announcement for breakfast came through the PA system at 7 a.m., my head throbbed from lack of rest. The next day, I told myself it was behind me. One weird glitch, nothing more. I tried to enjoy the ship. I sat by the pool with a drink, wandered into the casino for a while, even exchanged small talk with a retired couple from Florida who'd been on 9 cruises already. I laughed more than I expected to. For a few hours it almost worked, but when I returned to my cabin that night, I noticed something odd. The red light on my phone was blinking. A voicemail. My stomach dropped as I pressed the button. The message was short. My voice again, flat and urgent. "Don't trust the crew." I froze. My reflection in the porthole window seemed darker somehow. my own eyes staring back with something I didn't recognize. And for the first time since boarding, I wondered if coming on this cruise had been a mistake. I barely slept the second night, replaying that message in my head like a broken record. Don't trust the crew. It was insane. I didn't even know the crew. I'd seen them smiling, handing out drinks, pointing people toward the buffet. They were just people doing their jobs. But hearing it in my own voice, it crawled under my skin in a way I couldn't shake. The next morning, I decided to test it. I went down to the reception desk, pretending I'd lost my key card. The young woman behind the counter wore the practiced smile I'd seen all over the ship. Her name tag read, Elena. Of course, sir. Cabin number? 712. I said, watching her closely. She hesitated. It was brief, but it was there. Her fingers froze above the keyboard for half a second before she typed. And what's the name on the account? Michael Grant. Again, that tiny pause. She pressed her lips together, glanced at me, then quickly handed me a replacement card. Here you go. Please keep this one safe. I should have walked away, but I couldn't help myself. Weird thing happened last night, I said. My cabin phone rang. Someone was on the line, but it didn't make sense. Her smile faltered just slightly, the corners of her mouth twitching. Sometimes, we have technical glitches with the internal phones, nothing to worry about. But her eyes didn't match her voice. Her eyes were cold. That was enough to keep me on edge the rest of the day. I stuck to public areas, drifting between crowded lounges and sunlit decks. The more I watched the crew, the more I noticed subtle things I hadn't before. Their smiles seemed rehearsed, identical in rhythm, like they'd been trained to mimic warmth. Their movements were too synchronized, too efficient. When I walked past two stewards folding towels, I could swear they both turned their heads at the exact same moment, watching me until I was out of sight. That night, I tried to stay awake, pacing my cabin, chain-drinking instant coffee. But exhaustion won. I must have drifted off around 2:30. At 3 a.m., the phone rang again. This time, I hesitated before answering. My heart pounded in my throat. Finally, I lifted the receiver. The voice on the other end was mine again, but cracked, desperate. Michael, they know you're awake. Stay out of the hallways. I slammed the phone down, my whole body trembling. I staggered back, nearly tripping over my own bag. My eyes flicked to the door, half expecting it to burst open. Instead, I heard footsteps outside. Slow, heavy, deliberate. They stopped right at my cabin. Then came a soft knock. Not frantic, not polite, just patient. I pressed my back to the wall, every muscle in my body rigid. Whoever it was didn't knock again. They just stood there. I could feel it, like the air in the room was being pulled toward the door. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps moved on. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By breakfast, my nerves were frayed. I decided to confide in someone, anyone, just to see if I sounded crazy. On the pool deck, I found the retired couple I'd met earlier, Frank and Marlene. They were cheerful, sipping fruity drinks, waving when they saw me. But when I told them about the phone calls, the knocks, the warnings, they didn't laugh. They didn't brush it off. They just looked at each other. And then Frank leaned in close and whispered, "We got the calls, too." Frank's whisper hit me like a hammer. For the first time since this nightmare started, I wasn't alone. But instead of relief, dread sank deeper into my stomach. What did it say to you?" I asked. Marlene's voice was thin, almost trembling. It was our daughter's voice. "She's been gone 10 years, Michael, but the call was her, telling us not to leave our cabin at night." Frank added, 3:03, every night, like clockwork. The hairs on my arms stood up. Different voices, same message. Same time. I wanted to press them for more, but before I could, two crew members walked past our lounge chairs. Both wore blank smiles, eyes hidden behind reflective sunglasses. They didn't look at us, but the air shifted. I swear I saw Frank tense, Marlene clutching her drink tighter. We didn't speak again until they were gone. Frank leaned closer, his whisper sharp. "Don't talk about it where they can hear. The walls carry sound on this ship." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" Listen," he said. "The crew, they're not normal. Haven't you noticed?" I had noticed. Too many times to ignore. That night, I couldn't eat. I stayed in my cabin with the lights low, pacing, waiting for the inevitable. And at exactly 3:03, the phone rang again. I didn't want to answer. Every cell in my body screamed not to pick up. But I did. This time, the voice wasn't calm. It was frantic. Mine, but strangled, like speaking through water. "Michael, they're coming for you. Don't trust the elevators. Take the stairs." Almost immediately, I heard it. The whirring hum of the elevator outside my hallway. The ding of it arriving. Doors sliding open with a hiss. And then, silence. I crept toward the peephole, my pulse hammering in my ears. Through the fisheye glass, I saw 3 crew members standing shoulder to shoulder in front of my door. Smiling. Not moving. Just standing there, like mannequins waiting to be animated. I stumbled back, clamping my hand over my mouth to keep from gasping out loud. They didn't knock this time. They just waited. Minutes ticked by. My knees went weak, and I pressed against the far wall, praying they'd leave. Finally, the elevator dinged again. The 3 stepped back in unison, turned sharply, and walked away without a sound. I should have been relieved, but the silence after was worse. The next day, passengers were missing. Not officially, of course. The announcements said nothing, but at breakfast, entire tables sat empty that had been filled the day before. People whispered in corners. Some refused to leave their cabins at all. I ran into Frank and Marlene again. They looked pale, exhausted. "We got another call," Marlene said. "It told us not to look at the reflection in the dining room windows." "What happens if you do?" I asked. Frank shook his head. "Don't find out." Later that afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I stood near the huge glass walls of the dining hall, pretending to sip coffee, and let my eyes drift to the reflection. I froze. Everyone's reflection was there, eating, talking, moving, except mine. The glass showed my chair empty. I dropped the cup, coffee splattering across the floor. People glanced at me, frowning, but I didn't care. My reflection was gone. That night, I barricaded my door with the desk and chair, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my teeth. At 3:03, the phone rang again. This time, my voice sounded weak, breaking. "Michael, you can't leave. They won't let you leave. Not alive." And then the line went dead. Almost immediately, someone tried the handle of my cabin door. Slowly, patiently, like they already knew the desk wasn't going to hold forever. The handle jiggled again, harder this time. The desk legs screeched against the floor as something pushed from the other side. I held my breath, gripping the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a lamp, cord dangling like a useless tail. Then the sound stopped. Silence pressed against my cabin walls, heavier than the ocean itself. I waited a full 10 minutes before I dared move. My pulse didn't slow, though. It only climbed higher when I realized something. The phone hadn't gone dead. The receiver was still warm in my hand. And faintly, so faintly I thought my mind was cracking. I could hear breathing, not mine. Slow, deliberate, steady. I hung up so fast the clatter echoed in the tiny cabin. I wanted to believe I imagined it, but deep down, I knew I hadn't. The next morning, the atmosphere on the ship was different. People avoided eye contact, conversations cut short when crew members passed, and the crew themselves, their smiles were wider, like they knew something we didn't. Frank and Marlene were gone. I checked the pool deck, the dining hall, even the quiet library where they'd like to sit. Nothing. Their cabin door was locked, but taped to it was a printed notice. Unoccupied. Unoccupied. I'd spoken to them less than 12 hours before. That evening, I couldn't stand the tension anymore. I stormed down to reception, slamming my hands on the counter. Elena looked up, still wearing that plastic smile. "What happened to them?" I demanded. "I'm sorry, sir. Frank and Marlene. Cabin 930. Where are they?" Her smile didn't flicker. "There is no one by that name on our manifest." My blood turned to ice. "That's impossible. I talked to them. Perhaps you're overtired," she interrupted smoothly. "It's common on long cruises. May I suggest resting in your cabin?" Her tone wasn't sympathetic. It was final, like a command. I stumbled away, chest tight. Either the entire crew was gaslighting me, or worse, Frank and Marlene had never been real to them at all. That night, the phone didn't just ring once, it rang 3 times. 3:03, 3:13, 3:23. Each time, my own voice grew weaker, raspier, less human. The third call was almost a whisper, drowned by static. "Michael, they're inside already." I froze. The handle didn't move this time. Instead, I heard footsteps. Not in the hall, inside my cabin. Slow, bare, wet. I spun around, but the room was empty. I backed into the corner, lamp shaking in my grip, sweat pouring down my back. And then, in the mirror above the desk, I saw it. My reflection. But it wasn't moving like me. It was standing perfectly still, head tilted, smiling. I dropped the lamp. The crash shattered the silence, but the reflection didn't flinch. It just stared, mouth stretching wider than it should have been able to. And then, in my own voice, it said, "You should have listened." The mirror cracked from top to bottom. I stumbled out of the cabin, adrenaline overriding terror. I didn't care about the calls or the warnings anymore. I just needed to get out. But as I reached the stairwell, I realized every door I passed was ajar. Cabins that should have been locked stood wide open, lights buzzing inside, empty beds waiting. The ship was hollowing itself out. By the time I reached the lowest deck, the hum of the engines was drowned by another sound, dozens of phones ringing in unison. The echoes bounced off steel walls, vibrating in my bones. I covered my ears, but the ringing wasn't just external, it was inside me. When I stumbled into the service corridor, the phones went dead. Every single one. The silence was suffocating. Then, from behind me, a chorus of voices whispered the same words. My voice. Frank's voice, Marlene's voice, all overlapping, all distorted. "You can't leave." And standing at the end of the corridor, blocking the exit, was the entire crew. Every single one of them. Shoulder to shoulder, smiling. The crew didn't move. They didn't speak. They just stood there, rows of them, smiles frozen like painted masks. The fluorescent lights flickered above us, buzzing in irregular bursts. And for a moment, it looked like their faces glitched, like static across a television screen. I couldn't breathe. My chest locked tight, my legs rooted to the floor. Then one of them stepped forward. Elena, the receptionist. She was still smiling, but her eyes were blank, as if nothing lived behind them. She raised her hand and gestured toward the phones, lining the corridor walls. "Answer," she said. The word rolled out of her throat wrong, flat, almost mechanical. Every phone on that wall lit up at once, all of them ringing in perfect sync. I shook my head. No, no more. But the sound filled the hallway, vibrating through the floor, the walls, my skull. I could feel it drilling into me, like it wanted me to break, to give in. My knees buckled, my vision blurred. And somewhere in the static of those overlapping rings, I heard something new. A voice deeper than mine, deeper than Frank's, deeper than anything human. It said my name, Not Michael. Mikhail. Like it had known me before I was ever alive. I staggered backward, hand against the steel wall. "What do you want from me?" Elena tilted her head. Her smile didn't change, but her voice shifted. It wasn't hers anymore. It was mine again. "We just want you to answer." I couldn't. If I'd picked up that phone, I knew I wouldn't walk away whole. Maybe I wouldn't walk away at all. So I ran. The crew didn't chase me. They didn't have to. I tore through stairwells, hallways, past doors that no longer made sense. Cabins numbered wrong, corridors looping back on themselves. The ship wasn't built to let me escape. By the time I stumbled back to my cabin, I was drenched in sweat. The barricade I'd set up was gone. The door stood wide open, and the phone was ringing. Not at 3:03, not at 3:13, not at any time I could track. It was ringing now. I picked up the receiver because I couldn't stop myself. On the other end was silence. Then, after a long pause, the faint sound of my own breathing. And then a voice. Mine, but not mine. Broken, guttural, stretched. "You're not leaving this ship, Michael. You never boarded." The line went dead. I froze, heart slamming so hard I thought it might tear out of my chest. Never boarded. I turned slowly toward the mirror above the desk. The cracks had healed. The glass was whole again, and in it I saw myself, smiling wider than I ever could. That was the last clear memory I have. After that night, everything blurs, faces blending, hallways folding into one another. I don't know if days passed or hours. But if you're listening to this, if somehow my words are reaching you, take this seriously. Don't pick up the phone if it rings at 3:03. Don't even be on that ship. And if you already are, look in the mirror. If your reflection smiles first, it's already too late. Story 2. Why are you sitting in my cabin? That was the first thing I heard when I woke up, my eyes still sticky with sleep. A man stood at the foot of my bed, pale as paper, his voice flat and cold. His clothes didn't match. An old-fashioned suit with a crooked tie, like something out of a 1940s black and white photo. I sat up so fast I nearly hit my head on the bunk, but when I blinked, he was gone. The cabin was empty. I should have left the ship right then. My name's Eric Donovan. I'm 34, originally from Pittsburgh, but I live in Chicago now. I work in IT for a mid-sized logistics company. Nothing glamorous, just endless coding, server patches, and late nights. My coworkers pooled money for this cruise because I'd burned out hard last quarter. They told me to get some sun, take a break, maybe meet someone. Truth is, I didn't want to go. I've never liked crowds, never liked water either. But I went because I didn't want to admit how bad things had gotten. So here I was, 3 nights into a 7-day voyage, already regretting it. And now? A stranger in my cabin? No. I told myself it had to be a dream. Still, I checked the door. Locked from the inside. My cabin keycard was on the desk where I left it. The hall outside was empty, save for the steady hum of the ship's engines beneath everything, that low vibration you stop noticing until you really listen. I decided I wouldn't mention it. I'd brush it off, try to enjoy the day. But that was the last normal morning I'd have. Breakfast was chaos. The main dining hall packed, kids running between tables, waiters balancing trays. The smell of bacon and syrup clung to the air. I grabbed a plate, found a corner, and tried to pretend I wasn't surrounded by 800 strangers. Halfway through, a voice whispered at my ear, "Don't sit here." I turned. The same man, standing directly behind my chair, suit damp as though he'd stepped out of the ocean. I jumped up, sending my fork clattering to the floor. But when I looked again, nobody was there. The couple at the table beside me gave me a look like I'd lost my mind. I laughed it off, muttered something about a spill, and left my food untouched. Only as I walked out did I notice something odd. One of the crew, a young woman in a pressed white uniform, was watching me. Not like she was concerned, more like she was waiting to see what I'd do next. The rest of that day, I couldn't shake it. Everywhere I went, the pool deck, the theater, even the shops, I thought I saw him. Just at the edge of vision, standing too still among the moving crowd. By evening, I decided I needed answers. So I went to the reception desk. The young woman was there, the same one who'd been watching me earlier. Her name tag read Maria. "I think someone's been in my cabin," I told her quietly. "A man, tall, pale, old-fashioned suit. I don't know how he got in, but—" Her smile faltered. She looked over her shoulder, then leaned closer. "You saw him already?" she whispered. I froze. "You know who I mean?" Maria's eyes darted to the security camera overhead. Then she slid a folded piece of paper across the desk and said loudly, "Of course, sir. We'll have housekeeping double-check for you." I pocketed it, confused, and walked away before anyone noticed. Later, in my cabin, I unfolded the paper. It wasn't a note. It was a black and white photograph. A group of passengers stood on the very deck I'd been walking earlier. All smiles, posing for the camera. But there, in the middle, was the man. Same crooked tie, same hollow expression. The photo was dated June 12, 1947. That was the first moment I realized something was very, very wrong with this cruise. And it was far too late to get off. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep. The photograph lay on my desk, the man's pale face staring up from 70 years ago. Every time I tried to look away, my eyes drifted back. The edges of the photo were curled, brittle with age. It smelled faintly of mildew, as though it had spent decades sealed away. I kept asking myself the same question. How could Maria have it ready, folded, waiting for me? By 2 in the morning, the ship was quiet. That heavy silence that only happens on the ocean, where even the waves seem to hush. I finally forced myself into bed, determined to sleep. But the knock came almost immediately. 3 soft raps at my cabin door. I froze. No one should be knocking at that hour. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then 3 more knocks, louder this time. I pulled the covers up like a child, heart hammering. And just when I convinced myself I wouldn't answer, when the silence stretched so long it felt safe again, came the whisper, muffled but clear through the door. "Eric." That was all. My name. I shot up, grabbed the phone on the nightstand, and dialed reception. It rang twice before a tired male voice answered. "This is guest services." "There's someone outside my door," I hissed. "They're saying my name. I need security down here now." Silence. Then, in the same flat tone, "Sir, there's no one in that corridor. Please return to bed." Click. The line went dead. I didn't sleep a second after that. The next morning, I stumbled into the breakfast hall looking like I'd crawled out of a grave. Dark circles under my eyes, hands trembling from too much coffee. Maria was working the counter again. She glanced at me, her expression carefully neutral for anyone watching. But when I slid my plate across, she leaned in slightly. "Don't talk about him in public," she whispered. "They'll say you're crazy." Or worse. I opened my mouth to argue, but she shook her head, eyes sharp. Then she dropped a small envelope under my tray like it was a sugar packet. I carried it back to my table, heart racing. Inside was a single slip of paper, written in hurried scrawl. "He comes to those who notice. Stop noticing." I stared at the words until the letters blurred. Stop noticing? How was I supposed to ignore a man who kept showing up inside my cabin? That was when I spotted him again. At the far end of the hall, standing against the wall, motionless in his crooked tie. No food, no drink, just watching. I blinked, and he was gone. But in his place, the chair he'd been standing beside was still wet, as though drenched in seawater. Later that day, I tried to test it. I walked the length of the upper deck, forcing myself not to look for him. I kept my eyes on the horizon, the sparkling blue, the endless roll of the sea. But every reflective surface betrayed me, the glass railings, the polished brass trim. His face appeared, pale and blurred, over my shoulder and everyone. I couldn't stop noticing, and the more I noticed, the more real he became. By sunset, I wasn't the only one. I overheard a couple arguing near the pool. The woman was pale, trembling, whispering. He was in our room, just standing there. The man brushed her off, told her she was imagining things, but the look in her eyes told me she wasn't. That night, I tried again to call reception. Different voice this time. Female, steady, almost too calm. There is no passenger by that description on board, she said. Please refrain from spreading rumors. Enjoy your evening. Her words were polite. But underneath them, I heard a warning. And then, just before she hung up, her tone shifted for the briefest second, almost like she was speaking to someone else in the room with her. He's already chosen. Click, the line went dead. That was when I realized this wasn't just me. This ship carried something it shouldn't have, and it had already noticed me noticing it. By the third night, the ship didn't feel like a vacation liner anymore. It felt like a trap. Every hallway hummed with that same mechanical vibration, but now it seemed louder, like the whole vessel was straining against something unseen. I couldn't tell if it was paranoia or if the ship itself was warping under my feet. I avoided my cabin as long as I could. I lingered in the theater after the late show, pretending to watch the credits of some family-friendly comedy none of the audience was even laughing at. People filed out slowly, chatting about tomorrow's island stop, all smiles and sunscreen plans. But when the lights rose, I spotted him. The man in the crooked tie sat alone in the very back row. I swear to God, I watched him stand up and walk down the aisle. His shoes left wet prints on the carpet with every step. The crew didn't see it. Nobody saw it. Only me. And when he passed the exit door, I realized his reflection wasn't in the glass. I confronted Maria again, cornered her near the staff stairwell where no one else was around. You need to tell me what's happening, I demanded. Who is he? Why do I keep seeing him? Her hands trembled as she fumbled with her keys, keeping her eyes low. I shouldn't talk to you, she whispered. He's already marked you. The more you speak of him, the stronger he becomes. Then how do I stop it? I hissed. Maria finally looked up, and the look in her eyes chilled me. Not fear, not pity, resignation. You don't, she said. You survive long enough to disembark, if he lets you. Before I could say more, another crew member rounded the corner. Maria straightened instantly, her face going blank and professional, like we hadn't said a word. She nodded politely and walked away, leaving me alone with my stomach sinking. That night, things escalated. I woke to the sound of water dripping. Slow, steady. At first, I thought it was the bathroom faucet, but the air smelled sharp, like ocean brine, not tap water. I swung my feet off the bed and felt it immediately. The carpet was soaked. A wave of dread hit me. I grabbed my phone, flicked on the flashlight, and scanned the room. Salt water pooled in the corners of the cabin. My luggage was half submerged. And standing in the far corner, half shrouded in shadow, was the man. Suit dripping, skin pallid, his hollow eyes fixed on me. "Get out!" I screamed, snatching the desk lamp like it could do something. My voice cracked, throat raw with panic. The light flickered once, and when it steadied, he was gone. Only the water remained, lapping quietly at my ankles. By morning, the carpet was bone dry. I thought maybe I was losing my mind, until the announcement. "Attention passengers," the captain's voice boomed calmly over the PA. "Due to unforeseen weather, tonight's port stop will be delayed. Please remain on board. All amenities are still available." But when I checked my phone, the forecast showed nothing but clear skies for the next 3 days. I wasn't the only one who noticed. People grumbled in the dining hall. I overheard whispers, "Why won't they let us dock?" "Did you hear about the woman who went missing?" Missing? I pressed closer, but the couple lowered their voices, clearly afraid to say more. Later, as I paced the nearly empty lounge, a man about my age stopped me. Nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "You've seen him, haven't you?" he asked under his breath. My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" "The one in the old suit." His eyes darted around, panicked. "Don't lie. I can tell. He found me 2 nights ago. Now he's everywhere. In the mirrors. In the glass. I don't even look anymore." He grabbed my arm, fingers ice cold. "Don't notice him. That's how he wins. Just don't." Before I could respond, he jerked away, disappearing into the crowd like he'd never spoken. But his words rang in my head long after he was gone. Don't notice him. Except it was too late, I noticed. And I knew he wasn't finished with me. The 4th night broke me. I couldn't pretend anymore. Couldn't convince myself this was stress, or hallucinations, or a trick of cheap cruise ship plumbing. Because now, other passengers were disappearing. It started with the old couple from the dining hall. They were at breakfast every morning, always sitting near the window, always bickering about coffee refills. By the 5th morning, their table was empty. I asked the waiter where they were. He gave a blank smile. "We don't have records of every guest's habits, sir." But when I pressed, his expression froze, almost robotic. "They disembarked," he said finally. My blood ran cold. "How? We never docked." He didn't answer, just walked away. By afternoon, the ship's hallways looked wrong. I'd walked the same path a dozen times. Atrium to lounge to pool deck. But now the doors had shifted. Whole corridors bent in impossible angles. I swear I passed the same family 3 separate times, going in different directions, like the ship was folding in on itself, and everywhere I felt him. Reflected in glass panels, a shape behind me in elevator doors, the faint squelch of wet shoes in the hallway when I turned corners. I tried not to notice. I remembered that man's warning, but when the elevator doors closed and I saw the pale figure standing right behind me in the mirrored reflection, dripping onto the carpet, how could I not notice? I screamed. The doors opened. Nobody was there. That night, Maria slipped me a folded piece of paper while passing in the corridor. No words, no glance, just a crumpled note pressed into my palm. I opened it alone in my cabin, my hands shaking. It read, "He drowned here before. They all drowned here before. Some of us serve him now. Some of us hide. Don't go below deck 4. Don't speak to the water. And if he follows you into your dreams, don't wake up." The paper was soaked through at the edges, as if it had been dipped in seawater. I barely slept. When I finally did drift off, it wasn't rest. I dreamed of the ballroom, packed with passengers dressed in old-fashioned clothes, waltzing to broken music. Salt water sloshed around their ankles, creeping higher with every turn of the dance, and at the center of the floor he stood. The man in the suit, his tie crooked, his smile split too wide. He raised a glass in my direction, and though the music drowned out everything, I swear I heard the words, "Welcome back." I woke, gasping, sheets drenched, not with sweat, with salt water. The mattress sagged with the weight of it. My phone flickered and died the moment I tried to take a picture. I ran. Out of the cabin, down the corridor. Passengers passed me like shadows, faces blurred, conversations garbled like static. The ship vibrated beneath my feet as though straining against the ocean itself. I stumbled onto the pool deck. For a moment, I thought I'd escaped. But the pool was black, not blue. Black. The water churned violently, though the air was calm. No wind, no storm, just violent waves slamming against the sides, as if the ocean itself had risen through the pool. And then I saw him, standing at the far edge, shoes dripping, suit plastered to his body. Pale hands raised as though beckoning me closer. Around me, the other passengers moved calmly, oblivious. Children splashed in the kiddie pool. A man sipped a cocktail. No one reacted to the nightmare in front of me. I backed away, heart hammering. But when I turned, he was behind me. Closer this time. Close enough that droplets of salt water spattered onto my face. I bolted, I'm writing this in the dark corner of the ship's library now. I don't know how much longer I have before he finds me again. Every reflection shows him. Every surface ripples like the ocean, and the walls are starting to drip. If you're hearing this, don't take cruises. Don't trust the water, and whatever you do, don't look for him, because once you notice, he notices you. The last night began with silence. Not peace, not calm, the kind of silence you hear in a room after the screaming stops. I don't know what time it was when I left the library. The clocks had stopped. Every one of them. I passed a hallway lined with brass clocks, each frozen at 3:07. Passengers drifted by like they were sleepwalking. Their footsteps didn't echo. Their voices didn't register as words, just muffled static. I tried talking to one, grabbed a young man by the arm and asked where the captain was. He turned to me with a slow, watery grin. His eyes were pale and unfocused, and when he opened his mouth, a stream of seawater trickled down his chin. I let him go. I ran. My only thought was to find the bridge, to reach someone, anyone, who could explain this or stop it. But when I forced open the door to the command deck, my stomach dropped. The captain sat at the wheel, hat tilted low. Officers stood at their posts. Every uniform crisp, every stance perfect. Except they weren't breathing. Their skin was gray, bloated, stretched tight across bone. Seawater streamed down their collars, soaking the floor. The wheel turned itself, groaning as though steered by invisible hands. And at the center, where the captain's face should have been, there was nothing. Just a blur of moving water, rippling like a whirlpool. I stumbled backward, nearly slipping on the wet floor. That's when I heard his voice. Low, patient, soaked with the weight of the ocean. "You came back." I spun, heart slamming against my ribs. He was there. The passenger. The man in the suit. His hair slicked down, his shoes leaving puddles where he stood. Only this time, I noticed something I hadn't before. His name tag. Still pinned crooked to his lapel. D. Crowley. The same name from Maria's note. The one who drowned here before. "Why me?" I whispered. His smile widened. "Because you notice. The others don't. The others keep dancing." I backed away until my shoulders hit the door. "I'm not part of this." But he only tilted his head. "You already are." And then he was gone. Not vanished. Not evaporated. Just absorbed. Melted into the dripping walls like water soaking into cloth. I staggered out, chest heaving, shoes squeaking against the wet floor. The hallway outside bent and twisted, narrowing like the throat of a tunnel. And I realized with horror where it was leading. Down. Below deck 4. The place Maria's note warned me never to go. I don't remember walking. I only remember descending. The stairs went on forever, tighter and tighter, my hands sliding against rusted railings slick with seawater. By the time I reached the bottom, the air was damp and freezing. My breath came out in mist. The corridor was flooded, ankle deep. Lights flickered overhead, and at the far end stood a door I shouldn't have opened. But I did. The cargo hold yawned before me, half submerged, walls groaning as though the ocean itself pressed from the outside. Dozens of passengers floated in the black water, their eyes open but unseeing, mouths moving in silent words. Their bodies rose and fell with a tide that had no right to be inside a ship. And at the center, tethered to nothing, was him. D. Crowley, the drowned passenger. His body flickering between man and water, shifting like a reflection caught in waves. His arms spread wide, as if welcoming me home. The water surged, rising to my knees, then my waist. The walls trembled. The ship itself moaned as though it were alive and dying. I tried to scream, but the sound drowned in the roar of the tide. He whispered something. I couldn't hear it, but I felt it, inside my chest, inside my skull, pounding like a heartbeat, and when the wave crashed over my head, everything went black. I woke up in my cabin, dry, sheets tucked tight, bag packed. Like nothing had happened, the morning announcement chimed cheerfully. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be docking shortly. We hope you enjoyed your voyage with us." But when I turned to the mirror above the sink, water trickled down the glass, and reflected in the dripping surface, standing just behind me, was Dee Crowley smiling. "Tell me, when I step off this ship, will I really leave? Or did I already drown here years ago and just never noticed?" Story 3. Why are they all smiling like that? That was the first thought that froze in my chest as I stood on the open deck, orange life jacket biting into my neck, waiting for the safety drill to end. The ocean rolled calm and steady behind the line of passengers, but their faces weren't calm. Their faces weren't right. I should back up. My name is Ethan Price. I'm 34, and I work as a commercial insurance adjuster out of St. Louis. Cruises weren't exactly my thing. I'd always made fun of them, floating malls for retirees and drunk honeymooners. But after my divorce last spring, my sister convinced me to book a 7-day Caribbean trip. "It'll clear your head," she said. I figured she was right. A week away from spreadsheets, angry clients, and the echo of an empty apartment. The first day on board was almost normal. The clink of glasses in the atrium bar, the ridiculous size of the buffet, the muted thrum of the engines vibrating up through the carpet. I tried to relax, to pretend I wasn't alone, among 2,000 people drinking and laughing their way into the sunset. Then came the muster drill. It's a regulation on every cruise. At the sound of the alarm, passengers gather at their assigned station, put on life jackets, and wait while crew members demonstrate safety procedures. I'd done it once before on a short Bahamas cruise years ago. Nothing memorable. But this time was different. I followed the crowd down to my station on Deck 7. A crew member in a crisp white uniform checked my cabin card with a scanner, his expression stiff. Around me, people shuffled into rows, orange vests glowing against the setting sun. The smell of diesel and salt mixed in the air. I tried to shake off a creeping unease. That's when I noticed them. A whole section of passengers, maybe 30 or 40, standing utterly still. Their vests hung perfectly even, hands at their sides, eyes fixed straight ahead. No talking, no fidgeting, no casual chatter like everyone else. And then I saw the smiles. Identical. Tight-lipped, frozen, as if painted on. I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe a tour group, playing some weird joke. But when I glanced back a minute later, all of them turned their heads at the exact same angle, in the exact same second, following the crew member as he walked across the deck. I looked around to see if anyone else noticed. Couples were laughing, kids tugging at oversized jackets, an old man adjusting his hat. Nobody seemed disturbed. Nobody except me. And then, just as the crew member lifted the bullhorn to start the drill, I swear I heard it. 30 voices whispering at once. Too soft to catch words, but loud enough to raise the hairs on my arms. I should have walked away right then, but I didn't. I told myself I was imagining things. That's what I do for a living, convince myself that everything can be explained. Cracked foundations, burned wiring, collapsed ceilings. There's always a cause you can put on paper. But standing there on Deck 7, watching 30 strangers tilt their heads in perfect unison, I couldn't come up with one. The drill continued like nothing was wrong. Crew members shouted instructions through bullhorns, demonstrating how to fasten straps, how to form lines toward lifeboats. Kids groaned, parents checked phones, and yet those people, those silent ones, didn't budge. Their smiles never slipped. When the captain's voice finally echoed over the PA, cheerful and routine, the group moved again, not gradually, all at once. They turned toward him, heads snapping up in the same motion, like dolls responding to a hidden string. I felt a cold sweat trickle down my spine. As soon as the drill ended, I slipped out of the crowd. A man in a Hawaiian shirt laughed and patted me on the shoulder like we'd just survived something boring together. But I couldn't laugh. I needed to know who those people were. I ducked behind a lifeboat davit and watched as the crowd dispersed. Families and couples peeled off toward the elevators, toward the bars and restaurants. The silent group broke away too, but they didn't head inside. They marched down the deck, single file, toward a stairwell marked Crew Access. Passengers weren't supposed to go down there. I hesitated, pulse pounding. Curiosity burned stronger than common sense. I waited until the last orange vest disappeared through the door, then followed. The stairwell smelled of oil and sea air. The walls were painted industrial gray, scuffed from boots and carts. I crept down 2 flights, ears straining. The sounds of the ship dimmed until only the faint thrum of the engines remained. That's when I heard it, a low, humming chant. Not English, not any language I recognized. Dozens of voices, rising and falling in rhythm. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering. The door at the bottom was cracked open, a strip of dim light spilling out. I inched closer, breath shallow, and peeked inside. Rows of those same passengers stood shoulder to shoulder in a cramped storage room. Life jackets were piled in corners. Their orange vests glowed faintly in the low light, as if reflecting something I couldn't see. They swayed in unison, chanting in that hollow, wordless tone. And at the front of the room, a crew member stood with his back to me. He raised both arms high, palms outward, and the chant stopped dead. Silence pressed against my eardrums. Then, as one, every single head turned toward the door. Toward me. I stumbled back, slamming into the wall. The door swung wider with a groan. Nobody moved. They just stared, those same smiles stretching wider in the dim light. That was the last normal moment I had on that cruise. I bolted up the stairwell, my footsteps echoing far too loud against the metal steps. My chest ached with every breath, like I'd been running for miles, not just climbing a few flights. When I burst back onto Deck 7, the night air hit me like a slap. Couples strolled past with margaritas in hand. A band played steel drums near the pool. Normal life had returned in full force, like nothing was happening beneath their feet. I spun around. The stairwell door was still open. I expected them to pour out after me, those smiling faces, that crew member with his arms raised. But the doorway stayed empty. No chanting, no footsteps, just a yawning rectangle of shadow. I walked away fast, trying not to look like I was fleeing for my life. The rest of the night was a blur. I holed up in my cabin, curtains drawn tight. I thought about calling my sister, about unloading everything, but what could I say? Hey, remember that cruise you convinced me to take? There's a cult under the lifeboats. I poured whiskey from the minibar instead, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. But then came the knock. 3 short taps on my cabin door. Right around 2 a.m. I froze, glass halfway to my lips. Nobody knocks at that hour, not unless it's crew responding to an emergency. My stomach clenched. Slowly, I set the glass down and stepped to the door. Hello? My voice cracked. No answer, just silence and the hum of the ship. I opened the peephole. At first, no one was there. Then, after a second, a face leaned into view. One of them. One of the smiling passengers. His teeth were clenched together, lips stretched to the point of splitting. He didn't blink, didn't move, just pressed close enough to fog the glass with his breath. I stumbled back, heart pounding. The knock came again, 3 sharp raps that rattled the doorframe. I called the front desk, voice shaking. There's someone outside my room. Someone won't leave. The woman on the other end was calm, too calm. Sir, we've logged your concern. Security will check shortly. Please remain inside your cabin. But no one came. I sat on the bed for hours, lights on, staring at the door. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me under. When I woke, daylight was streaming through the curtains. I staggered to the door and yanked it open. The hallway was empty. Nothing but the smell of cleaning chemicals and the faint scuff of vacuum wheels. Except for the life jacket. It lay neatly folded right at my threshold, straps tied, the same orange as the others. A tiny tag stitched on the collar read, Muster Station 7C, Ethan Price. My name. I hadn't written it, and I hadn't told anyone my muster station. That was the moment I realized I wasn't imagining it. They knew who I was, and they wanted me to join them. The next morning, I told myself I was going to the reception desk in person. I'd demand answers, force someone to take me seriously. But when I got there, the line was long, full of people complaining about lost luggage and billing errors. I stood there sweating, clutching the folded life jacket I'd found outside my door. When it was finally my turn, the young woman behind the counter gave me a polite smile that didn't touch her eyes. "How can I help you, sir?" I set the life jacket on the counter. This was outside my cabin last night, with my name on it. Someone knocked. Someone was there. I called security and no one came. She studied the tag for a moment, then slid it back toward me. All passengers are required to keep their safety equipment in their cabins. Perhaps you misplaced it. No, I snapped. This wasn't mine. Someone left it. Someone's been... Her smile tightened. Sir, please keep your voice down. Safety equipment is logged to each cabin. If you'd like, I can have housekeeping deliver a replacement. I felt my stomach drop. She was brushing me off, not because she didn't believe me, but because she didn't want to talk about it. Behind me, I heard a cough. When I turned, a group of passengers was standing in the lobby. The same group, the same stillness, the same two wide smiles. Their eyes were locked on me, unblinking. Nobody else seemed to notice. I left the counter without another word, heart thudding against my ribs. That night, the captain's voice boomed over the PA. Attention all passengers. Due to updated regulations, a secondary muster drill will take place tomorrow morning. Please report to your assigned stations at 9 a.m. Another drill. My stomach knotted. It felt staged, like it wasn't for safety at all. It was for them. I barely slept. When morning came, I forced myself to go anyway. Better to see it through than to hide in my cabin. The crowd gathered again on Deck 7, orange vests, bright under the sun. Crew members barked instructions, and then, one by one, the smiling passengers filed in. This time, they weren't mixed into the crowd. They formed a solid block at the back of the deck, standing shoulder to shoulder, their heads tilted as the announcements droned on. I tried to edge away, but a crew member in sunglasses blocked me. "Stay with your group, sir. Regulations." His tone was polite, but his grip on my arm was iron. The drill ended. The crowd clapped half-heartedly and began to disperse. But the block of smiling passengers didn't move. They stayed rooted, eyes fixed on me. Then, in perfect unison, they lifted their life jackets and slipped them on. Each click of the buckles was simultaneous, sharp, and final. A voice rose from their ranks, not loud, but deep and resonant, cutting through the chatter. "Ethan Price, Muster Station 7C." My chest went cold. My name carried across the deck, clear as the horn that signaled departure. Heads turned. Passengers glanced around, confused. But when I tried to speak, when I tried to protest, no sound came out. My throat had locked. They knew me, they'd marked me, and they weren't going to let me walk away. I didn't go back to my cabin right away. I paced the outer deck, sucking in the salty wind, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. But the echo of that voice, my name spoken in front of hundreds of people, wouldn't leave my head. By the time I finally forced myself back inside, the corridor outside my door was silent. My hands shook so badly, I could barely slide the keycard. When the lock clicked, I pushed in and froze. The life jacket I'd taken to the reception desk was lying on my bed, its straps neatly folded, tag facing up, my name written bold across it. I dropped it like it burned. My chest was heaving. I picked up the cabin phone and dialed security. This time I wasn't going to let them ignore me. The line rang once before a voice answered. Flat, monotone. "Muster Station 7C, Mr. Price." I slammed the receiver down and stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. My cabin felt too small, the walls closing in. I couldn't breathe. That night, there was no announcement, no music from the atrium, no chatter in the halls. The whole ship seemed to sink into silence. I barely slept, lying fully clothed on top of the covers, flinching at every creak. At 3:07 a.m., the alarms blared. The ship-wide klaxon that signals emergency. Lights flashed red in the hall. A voice boomed over the PA. "All passengers proceed to your muster stations immediately." I stumbled into the hall with the others. Some were still rubbing their eyes, confused. Others moved with perfect calm. When I reached Deck 7, my stomach dropped. The smiling passengers were already there, waiting, perfectly aligned. The rest of us, normal passengers, clustered near the crew, bewildered, frightened. The air felt electric, like before a storm. The captain appeared on a raised platform, his uniform pressed, face pale under the harsh lights. He raised a hand. "This is a precautionary exercise. Please remain calm." But no one listened. The crowd shifted, restless. Somewhere behind me, a woman sobbed. The smiling passengers turned as one, their heads snapping toward the normal guests. Their grins widened until their faces looked stretched, wrong. Then, without a word, they began stepping forward. I backed away, pushing through the crowd. People shouted, stumbled. Crew members moved to intercept, but stopped mid-step, frozen, as if something held them in place. One of the grinning men reached out, hand pale under the deck lights, fingers brushing my sleeve. "Ethan Price," he said. His voice was soft, reverent. "You're late." I tore free and ran. I don't remember how I made it through the stairwells, how I found myself on an upper deck balcony staring out at the Black Sea. The ship's horn blared again, long and mournful. Below, the muster station dissolved into chaos. Passengers screamed. But over it all, I heard the synchronized chant of that group, their voices carrying over the water. 7C, 7C, 7C. And then, silence. When I finally looked back down, the deck was empty. Every single one of them, crew, passengers, the smiling block, gone. Just the orange life jackets left behind, scattered like shed skins. I don't remember getting off the ship. I don't remember the rest of that night. All I know is I woke up days later, alone in a motel room, my own life jacket folded neatly on the chair across from me. The tag still says my name. And I keep hearing the echo in my head every night around 3 a.m., like the call of the sea itself, reminding me I never made it to muster. Story 4. Why are there more lifeboats than passengers? The man didn't even look at me when he said it. He was slouched against the outer rail, his shirt half untucked, the glow of the ship's deck lights turning his sweat-slick forehead yellow. I thought he was drunk. His voice was slurred, his words almost drowned out by the thrum of the ship's engines. But the way his eyes tracked the rows of lifeboats hanging from their davits, like he was counting them, one by one, froze me more than his tone. I almost asked him what he meant. Instead, I did what most people do. When faced with unsettling nonsense from a stranger, I smiled awkwardly and walked past. That single decision would come back to haunt me. My name is Lauren Pierce. I'm 34, from Portland, Oregon, and I work as a middle school counselor. My life, in theory, should feel stable, routine. I'm the one who talks kids down from panic attacks, who holds their secrets about self-harm or abusive parents, who tries to convince them the world isn't as dark as it feels in their heads. And most of the time, I can fake it well enough that they believe me. But the truth is, my own world had collapsed just months earlier. My mom, my anchor, died after a long, brutal fight with cancer. I spent the last year of her life in a cycle of hospice visits, midnight calls, and the constant antiseptic stink of hospitals. When she finally passed, I thought I'd feel relief. Instead, my apartment felt like a mausoleum. That's why I booked the cruise. A week on the Pacific, no responsibilities, just open water and quiet. I convinced myself it would help me breathe again. My coworkers even joked that I'd come back tan, rested, and maybe finally willing to get back out there. I didn't tell them I hadn't really spoken to a man since my mom's diagnosis. I wasn't going on this trip for adventure. I was going to disappear, if only for a little while. The ship itself was overwhelming. The Celestia Dawn, 12 decks, multiple swimming pools, a miniature golf course, even a fake piazza with painted ceilings and violin music piped through hidden speakers. I should have been impressed. Instead, from the moment I stepped aboard, there was a low, vibrating hum beneath my feet, like a heartbeat buried in steel. At first, I thought it was just the engines, but lying in my cabin that first night, I could have sworn I felt it breathing under me. The days blurred. I tried to relax, sunbathing with a book, grazing buffets where the smell of fried food clung to my hair, losing an hour in the casino watching strangers cheer for blackjack. But small things tugged at my attention, like the dining hall. On my second night, I went down around 9 p.m. for a late bite. The place should have been busy, but half the tables were empty, completely empty, not just between seatings. Trays of untouched food sat on the counters, steam long gone cold. When I asked a server if the place had closed early, he stared at me like I'd asked him what planet we were on. Then he smiled stiffly and said, "Everything is as scheduled, ma'am." Another night, I tried to take the elevator from deck 6 to deck 9. The panel didn't have a 7 button. I figured maybe 7 was crew only, but later when I checked the deck map in the lobby, it showed 7 as, quote, passenger cabins. The weirdest part? When I looked again the next morning, the map had changed. Deck 7 was gone. Still, I wrote it off. Ships are confusing. Maybe I was tired. Maybe grief was still making my brain misfire. I told myself all of that. Until I found the door. It was the third day, mid-afternoon. I'd skipped the pool and decided to take the stairs instead of the elevator, just to get my steps in. Between deck 6 and deck 8, I noticed a small landing with a metal door. The sign read, "Crew access only." Normally, that would have been enough to keep me away, but the handle wasn't locked. Out of habit, I pushed it. The door creaked open into a corridor that felt wrong. The carpet was darker, threadbare in places. The walls had scuff marks, scratches like luggage had been dragged down them. The lights overhead buzzed faintly, dimmer than anywhere else on the ship. And it was silent. So silent I could hear the faint drip of water somewhere down the hall. At first I thought it was just a storage passage, but then I saw the cabin doors. They lined both sides, identical to passenger rooms, but the numbering was strange. 7 to 21, 7 to 23, 7 to 25, then it skipped, 7 to 41, number 7 to 27, 7 to 29, 7 to 31. The sequence made no sense, like entire rooms had been erased. My pulse kicked. I walked slowly, glancing at the closed doors. I half expected one to open, for some crew member to yell at me, but nothing stirred. Just my own footsteps, echoing too loud, too sharp. The hallway stretched on, longer than the ship could possibly be. "That's enough," I whispered, trying to steady my breath. I turned back toward the stairwell. Only, it wasn't there. Behind me, more hallway stretched into dim light. My chest tightened. I walked faster, my flats thudding against the thin carpet. "You're fine, Lauren. You're fine." And then, as suddenly as if someone had flipped a switch, the stairwell door was there again. Exactly where it should have been. I didn't think. I shoved it open and bolted upward, not stopping until I burst into the casino. Neon lights, slot machines chiming, tourists clapping around a table. The noise was a slap to the face. I leaned against the railing, gasping, my hands shaking. No one noticed. To them, I was just another woman who'd lost a bet. That was the last normal thing I'd see on that cruise. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. Grief, stress, the ship's endless motion. Take your pick. That hallway couldn't exist. Not really. I even pulled out the laminated deck map they'd tucked into my welcome folder, running my finger along each labeled level. 6, 7, 8. Nothing about a hidden passage or skipped room numbers. Just neat lines, tidy squares. Still, when I left my cabin for breakfast, I felt eyes on me. Not the casual kind of glances you get on vacation when strangers size each other up. These were slower, heavier. I caught them from the crew. A housekeeper with a cart in the hallway stopped mid-swipe of her cloth, watching me until I passed. A bartender polishing glasses followed my reflection in the mirror far longer than necessary. When I tried to smile, he looked away too quickly, as if caught. At the buffet, I filled my plate with eggs and fruit, but the food tasted stale, like it had been sitting for hours. At the next table over, a family of 4 laughed too loudly at nothing, their movements just slightly delayed, as if they were mimicking what normal families looked like. Every clink of their forks made my teeth ache. After breakfast, I forced myself to ask at the guest services desk. The man behind the counter wore a perfect corporate smile, his name tag reading, Adrian. "Hi," I said, sliding the deck map across the counter. "Can you explain something? Last night I noticed a door on the landing between 6 and 8. It opened into what looked like another corridor of cabins. But I don't see it here." Adrian didn't even glance at the map. His smile didn't shift. "All accessible passenger areas are clearly labeled, ma'am. You must have mistaken a service door." No, this had cabin numbers, 7s, 21, 23. Sometimes signage is replaced slowly. He cut in, his tone flat beneath the cheer. "There is no passenger access on deck 7. "Then, what are those rooms for?" I asked, pushing harder than I should have. For the briefest flicker of a second, his smile dropped. His jaw tightened. Then, just as quickly, it was back. "Crew rest quarters. Nothing of interest to you, I assure you." Before I could press further, someone else stepped to the counter, loudly asking about shore excursions. Adrian's attention snapped away, like I'd never spoken. I walked away, heart hammering. Crew rest quarters? With passenger-style doors and numbers? And that hall stretching far longer than it should have. By mid-afternoon, I couldn't shake the paranoia. Every time I walked the decks, I felt like I was circling something that didn't add up. The ship was too big, yet too small. Corridors doubled back, stairwells ended in walls, doors appeared where I swore they hadn't been the day before. That night, I joined a trivia game in one of the lounges, just to distract myself. The host, a perky woman with a microphone and plastic smile, asked questions while passengers scribbled answers. I was paired with an older couple from Phoenix. Nice enough people. But halfway through the game, I realized something strange. The woman was wearing the same blouse I'd seen on another passenger the night before. Not just similar, identical, down to the small tear near the cuff. I must have stared too long, because she smiled at me with perfect teeth and said, "We're all family here, aren't we?" Her voice was too calm, too rehearsed. I excused myself before the game ended, heart racing. I should have gone back to my cabin and locked the door, but curiosity, it aided me worse than fear. By 11 that night, I was back in the stairwell, standing in front of the same crew-only door. The handle was cool in my palm. For a moment, I thought it would be locked this time, but it turned, just as easily as before. The corridor stretched ahead, darker now, colder. I hesitated, then stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind me, muffling the ship's normal noise. My breath echoed too loudly. The numbering was stranger this time. 7 to 21, 7 to 23, 7 to 25, then 7 to 41, then 7 to 21 again. I stopped dead. My eyes traced the brass plate twice, 3 times. It was the same room number I'd just passed. I reached out and touched it, half expecting my hand to slip through. The metal was solid, cold. A sound whispered from inside. Not a voice. Not exactly. More like the sound of water rushing through pipes, but too rhythmic, almost like breathing. I backed away, pulse pounding in my ears. And then I heard footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. From somewhere further down the hall. I turned, but the corridor stretched endlessly, no sign of anyone. Just that faint dripping and the steady tread of shoes against carpet drawing closer. I didn't wait to see who or what was coming. I spun, bolted back to the stairwell, and yanked the door open so hard it slammed into the wall. The noise cut off instantly. The hum of the ship returned, the laughter from the casino 2 decks above drifting faintly down. I pressed my forehead to the cool metal of the door, shaking. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. That was when it hit me. The door didn't lock. The hall was always there, waiting, and something inside was moving. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard those footsteps again, measured and steady, pacing toward me through that impossible hallway. By dawn, my body ached from lying stiff on the narrow bed, eyes pinned to the ceiling. When I finally forced myself up, the mirror above the desk startled me. My skin looked gray, like I hadn't slept in days. My reflection felt wrong, lagging half a second behind when I tilted my head. I slammed the bathroom light on and stared until my reflection caught up, convincing myself I was imagining it. By breakfast, I was convinced the crew knew. The smiles were tighter, the greetings felt heavier. Even passengers I'd never spoken to gave me long, searching looks. A man in a Hawaiian shirt whispered something to his wife, while his eyes never left me. A little girl stared so long I snapped, "What?" She just smiled, too wide for her face, and turned away. I avoided guest services. I didn't want to hear another polite dismissal. Instead, I spent the day trying to enjoy the ship. Trivia games, the pool, a movie in the theater. But everywhere I went, there were doubles. That same blouse I'd noticed on 2 women before, now I saw it on 3. The same man in khakis and a striped polo appeared on the top deck, then again near the casino, then again by the elevator, too close in time for him to have walked between. That night, I thought maybe I'd imagined the footsteps. Maybe adrenaline had twisted the sound. Maybe if I opened that door again, I'd find nothing. So against all reason, I went back. The handle turned easily. Inside, the corridor glowed with a dim yellow light, as if the bulbs themselves were dying. The numbering was worse now. 7 to 21, 7 to 23, 7 to 41, 7 to 21, 7 to 19. The sequence shuffled, repeating, out of order. I forced myself to walk further than before. The carpet grew damp, squishing faintly under my shoes. The air smelled like mildew and iron. Halfway down, I passed a door marked 7 to 23. From inside came a faint knock. 3 raps, slow, too deliberate. I froze. My throat closed up. Then, before I could step away, the knob turned. The door creaked open an inch, revealing nothing but blackness. And then, an eye, a human eye, bloodshot and wet, staring at me through the gap. I stumbled back, slamming into the opposite wall. The door opened wider, but instead of a person stepping out, the darkness itself seemed to spill forward, thick and heavy, like tar. The eye disappeared into it, swallowed whole. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I ran. The hallway stretched. The more I sprinted, the longer it grew. Room numbers blurred past me, repeating endlessly. 7 to 21, 7 to 41, 7 to 23, 7 to 21. The damp carpet sucked at my shoes, slowing me. Somewhere behind me, footsteps started again. Not rushed, not panicked, just steady, patient, as if whatever was back there knew I couldn't outrun it. I screamed. The sound felt flat, swallowed by the air. At last, the stairwell door came into view. I lunged, slammed it open, and spilled out onto the familiar landing. I collapsed against the railing, chest heaving. For a moment, silence. Then, so faint I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it, came a voice, whispering through the metal door. It said my name. I bolted up the stairs, 2 at a time, and didn't stop until I reached the main deck. The night air hit me like ice, but it wasn't the relief I expected. The deck was empty, completely, unnaturally empty. No couples at the railings. No staff clearing glasses, not even a drunk staggering back from the bar. The ship was silent. Then, from somewhere above, came the faint sound of music. Tinny, warped, like a gramophone playing underwater. It was a ballroom waltz, slow and uneven, bleeding into the night. I followed it, legs shaking, until I reached the glass doors leading into the midship lounge. Inside, the chandeliers were lit, casting the room in a golden glow. And it was full. Dozens of passengers danced in slow circles, their movements stiff, mechanical, their faces blurred, smudged like an unfocused photograph. The waltz warped in and out, sometimes speeding up, sometimes dragging. I pressed my hand to the glass and whispered, "What the hell?" That's when one of the dancers stopped. Its head snapped toward me in a way no neck should move, jerking 90 degrees. Even through the blur, I felt its gaze. One by one, the others followed, their faces all turning toward me, smudged eyes locking on mine. The music stopped. I staggered back from the glass, but the door handle rattled on its own, turning slowly. I ran again. Corridors twisted on themselves. The layout I'd memorized was wrong. Elevators led to different floors than the buttons promised. I passed the same cleaning cart 3 times, even though it was abandoned in different spots each time. When I finally burst into my cabin, the door slammed behind me with a force that shook the frame. My breathing echoed in the tiny space, but the room felt off. The carpet was damp again. My suitcase was gone. In its place was a single object, a black and white photo, face down on the desk. My stomach turned as I picked it up. It was me, standing at the railing earlier that day. But not quite me. The figure's face was too wide, the eyes too far apart, the grin too sharp. And standing behind the figure, just out of focus, was a tall shadow, hand resting on its shoulder. The photo slipped from my fingers. I didn't even notice at first that the cabin door had opened again. Someone, or something, was standing in the frame, not moving, just watching. The silhouette in the doorway didn't move. My pulse pounded so hard I could feel it in my jaw. The cabin's dim light made it impossible to see detail, but I knew what I was looking at. The shoulders were too high, the arms too long, and the head tilted in that unnatural angle I'd seen through the lounge glass. "Who's there?" My voice cracked as soon as it left me. The thing didn't answer. Then the lights flickered, once, twice, and in that split second of strobing, it was suddenly closer. Halfway inside the cabin, I grabbed the only weapon I could think of, the desk chair. I hurled it at the figure with everything I had. The chair clattered against the wall, but the doorway was empty. I thought I'd lost it, until I felt a weight on the carpet, the damp squish of it under my feet, and then whispers. Not behind me, not in front of me, inside my ears. A voice repeating my name in a distorted echo. I bolted. The hallway outside was swaying as if the whole ship had tilted. The walls curved wrong, narrowing at the ceiling. Doors on either side hung open, but every cabin I passed was empty. Beds unmade, suitcases toppled, glasses of water still trembling on nightstands, as if someone had just left. I shouted for help. My voice vanished into the dark. Somewhere behind me, heavy footsteps began to follow. Slow, deliberate. I stumbled down a stairwell and shoved through a fire exit. The metal door led not to another corridor, but directly onto a deck I didn't recognize. It stretched impossibly long, like a football field laid across the sea. Wind whipped at me, carrying the scent of rust and brine. And there, lined along the railing, stood dozens of passengers, perfectly still, perfectly silent. Each one staring straight out at the black horizon. I took a step closer, heart pounding. Their clothes were wrong, decades out of date, suits and dresses like they'd stepped out of an old photograph. Their skin was pale, waxy, and their eyes empty sockets staring out to sea. I backed away, but the deck didn't end. No matter how far I walked, it kept stretching, the rows of silent passengers multiplying. The ship groaned, a deep metallic wail that vibrated through my bones. Somewhere above, a PA system crackled to life. A calm female voice announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for choosing the Crescent Star. Please remain still until final departure." The passengers turned in unison, all their eyeless faces now locked on me. I ran, sprinting across a deck that would not end. My legs screamed, my lungs burned, but the ship itself seemed to shift beneath me, stretching the space between every step. I screamed until my throat tore, but no sound carried. Finally, my body gave out. I collapsed against the railing, gasping. The ocean below was darker than night, endless and flat. And that's when I saw my reflection in the black water. It wasn't me. The reflection grinned, its eyes hollowed out, mouth stretching impossibly wide, teeth like broken glass. And behind it, a tall shadow placed its hand on my shoulder. I didn't feel it at first, but when I finally looked down, a pale skeletal hand was resting there in reality too. I froze, couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The last thing I remember was the voice in my ear again, soft and patient this time. "You're one of us now." The screen goes dark. No rescue, no escape. Only the endless ocean. And the ship that never docks. Story 5. Don't tell anyone you saw me. Those were the first words she said before vanishing into the crowd. My name's Eric Malone. I'm 34, an electrician from Cleveland, Ohio. Last spring, after working 12-hour shifts through an ice storm season, I finally treated myself to a week-long cruise to the Caribbean. I wasn't exactly the cruise type. I get seasick easy, and I'm more of a guy who spends weekends fixing things around the house, but my sister insisted. She said, "Eric, you've been living like a hermit. Go live a little." So I did. The moment I stepped on board, I understood what she meant. The air smelled like chlorine and salt, music pumped from hidden speakers. The ship felt less like a vessel and more like a floating city. Glittering halls, golden elevators, endless buffets. That's when I noticed her. A girl, maybe 12, standing near the check-in desk. She had wet black hair hanging over her face like she'd just come out of the pool, but her dress was dry. She looked right at me, her eyes sharp, too sharp for a kid that age, and then she whispered it. "Don't tell anyone you saw me." She slipped behind a family, dragging their luggage, and disappeared into the flow of passengers. I brushed it off at first. Jet lag, long drive, overactive imagination. But the thing about that sentence, it stuck in my head like a splinter. Dinner that night should have been perfect. Ribeye, endless dessert, a cold beer. But I couldn't focus. Every time I glanced toward the dining hall entrance, I expected her to be there. By the time I went back to my cabin, I told myself to stop being weird. She was probably just a guest's kid, playing around. Except when I checked the welcome directory on the TV, scrolling through passenger manifests, I didn't see her listed. I scrolled again. And again. Over 2,000 names. Families, couples, kids. No one around 12 traveling alone. No last name close to hers, if I'd even known it. That was the first time my stomach turned with unease, and it had nothing to do with seasickness. The next morning, I saw her again. I was cutting across Deck 7 toward the outdoor pool when I caught her reflection in a porthole. Not her, just her reflection. She was walking parallel to me, head tilted, lips moving like she was humming. When I spun, no one was there. I pressed my hand against the porthole glass. Cold, damp. A crew member passing by noticed me staring. "Sir, you okay?" I nodded quickly, pulling back, but as the crewman left, I could have sworn I saw water dripping from his shoes, leaving no trace behind. That was when I should have reported it. Should have said something to guest services, to anyone. But something inside me, maybe her warning, kept me quiet. I didn't realize then that silence was exactly what she wanted. I barely slept that night. Every time I drifted off, I dreamed of dripping footsteps outside my cabin door. I'd wake up, heart pounding, only to hear nothing but the low thrum of the ship's engines. By morning, I told myself I was being paranoid. People hallucinate at sea all the time, right? Something about the rocking, the recycled air. But when I went up to breakfast, the lie fell apart. Because she was there again. She sat at a table near the juice station, swinging her legs like any ordinary kid waiting for her parents. But no one sat with her. Her plate was empty. Her eyes never blinked. When she noticed me, she smiled. Not sweetly, more like someone holding a secret over you. I froze in the middle of the buffet line. Passengers jostled past me, loading up on scrambled eggs and bacon, chatting about excursions. When I finally worked up the nerve to walk over to her, she was gone. The chair still rocked slightly, like someone had just left it, and the floor beneath it? Wet. I decided I wasn't crazy. I decided I'd prove she was real. So I stopped one of the crew. A young woman in a crisp white uniform, hair tied back perfectly. "Excuse me," I said. "There's a little girl wandering around alone. Black hair, pale skin, maybe 12. I saw her just now." Her smile faltered. Just a fraction. "What's her name, sir?" she asked. I don't know." She tilted her head, almost mechanically. "We keep track of every miner on board. You must be mistaken." "I'm not. I swear I saw her." Her smile snapped back into place. "Then enjoy your breakfast, sir." And just like that, she walked away. The rest of that day was a blur. The ship was alive with noise. Kids laughing in the pool, slot machines ringing in the casino, an old man playing Sweet Caroline on the piano in the lounge. But no matter where I went, I felt eyes on me. In the hallway mirrors, I'd catch a flicker of her dress. In the shuffle of passengers, I'd hear a small laugh that didn't fit. I kept telling myself I was chasing shadows. But that night, as I lay in bed, I heard the cabin door creak open, very slowly. A shadow slipped inside, small, child-sized. I didn't move. My chest locked, my mouth went dry. The shadow drifted closer, bare feet whispering against the carpet. She stopped right beside me. I could feel the cold radiating off her. She leaned down until her wet hair brushed my cheek. And in the dark, she whispered, "You shouldn't have told them." I don't remember sleeping after that. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, every muscle stiff with dread. The only thing that proved it wasn't a nightmare was the damp spot on my pillow where her hair had brushed me. By morning, it had dried. But I couldn't. I went to guest services, determined this time to get answers. The desk attendant, a middle-aged man with polite eyes, listened patiently as I described her. "Sir," he said gently, "no one matches that description. Children aren't allowed to roam unsupervised. If you like, I can send security to check your deck." "Do it," I snapped. He nodded, wrote something on a clipboard. But I noticed his pen wasn't moving. He wasn't writing at all, just pressing the tip down into the paper until it tore. When I glanced back up, his smile was wider. "We'll look into it," he said flatly, and he dismissed me with a nod. I knew then the crew wasn't going to help. So I decided to find proof myself. I carried my phone everywhere, filmed hallways, took pictures of mirrors, tried to catch her in reflections and shadows in doorways. Most of the time, the footage came back blank, just blurry lights, static. But once, in the reflection of a stairwell window, I saw her, perfectly clear. And when I replayed the video, I realized something. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking past me, over my shoulder, at something I couldn't see. That night, I avoided my cabin. Instead, I wandered the ship, sticking to crowds. Around midnight, I ended up on deck 11 by the lifeboats. The air was sharp with salt and the low groan of waves. Most passengers were asleep. That's when I heard it. A voice, small, soft. "Eric," I froze. She stood by the railing, hair blowing in the wind, pale dress fluttering. "How do you know my name?" I whispered. She tilted her head. "Because you're the one who listens." I wanted to demand more, but her face changed. Her smile dropped. Her eyes widened in fear. And she pointed behind me. I turned. The deck was empty. Lifeboats swayed on their hooks, nothing but shadows. When I turned back, she was gone, but the railing where she had stood was dripping wet, as though she'd climbed straight out of the ocean. By the time I returned to my cabin, I was shaking. I didn't notice the folded piece of paper slipped under my door until I nearly stepped on it. It wasn't hotel stationery. The paper was wrinkled, water-stained. 3 words scrawled across it. "Don't go below." I stared at that water-stained note until the words burned into my head. Don't go below. But what did below mean? Engine room? Storage decks? I'd barely explored half the ship, and suddenly every hallway felt like a trap door waiting to drop me into something I wasn't supposed to see. I shoved the note into my pocket and promised myself I'd avoid those areas. Stay on the upper decks, blend in with the crowds, simple. Except the ship had other plans. The next morning, my keycard stopped working. I went to the service desk, explained the issue. The attendant, a young guy this time, nervous smile, handed me a replacement without a word. When I got back to my cabin, the new card didn't open the door either. Instead, the little screen above the handle flashed, "Cabin not found." I tried again, same result. Passengers walked by, barely glancing at me. No one reacted to the obvious glitch. I flagged down a steward. "Hey, my key isn't working, can you help?" He took the card, scanned it. The screen blinked again. "Cabin not found." He looked at me like he'd never seen me before. "Sir, are you sure you're on this deck?" "I've been here all week," I snapped. "Cabin 723. He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "There is no cabin 723. And with that, he walked away. Panic gnawed at me. I stormed up and down the hall, checking every door. Cabin 721, cabin 722, cabin 724, but where my door should have been. Just a blank stretch of wall, like the ship had swallowed my room whole. I stumbled back, dizzy, gripping the handrail. That's when I saw her again. The girl. She was crouched at the far end of the hall, hair hanging forward, dripping onto the carpet. "You weren't supposed to tell them," she whispered. "I didn't," I shouted. My voice cracked. I kept it quiet, I swear." Her eyes narrowed. "Then why are they looking at you?" I spun. The hallway behind me was lined with passengers, dozens of them, silent, staring. Men in polo shirts, women in sundresses, kids clutching pool toys, all with seawater streaming down their faces, all blocking the only exit. I bolted, shoved past them. Their arms brushed against me, clammy, slick. Not solid, not alive. I didn't stop until I hit a stairwell. I pounded down, flight after flight, the air growing colder, damper, each step echoing too long, like the stairwell stretched deeper than the ship should allow. By the time I burst into a lower corridor, I was gasping. The walls down here were different, rusted, dripping, more like a submarine than a luxury liner. The lights flickered dim orange, barely cutting the gloom, and painted across the far wall in dark, dripping letters were 3 words, "Welcome below, Eric." That's when I realized I hadn't chosen to come down here. The ship had chosen for me. And I wasn't alone. The corridor stretched on forever, metal bulkheads sweating salt water, pipes rattling like they carried something alive inside. My shoes squelched on the floor, each step heavier than the last, like the ship itself was pulling me deeper. Behind me, faint footsteps echoed, but they didn't match mine. Too light, too quick. I turned. The girl stood halfway down the corridor. Same wet hair plastered to her cheeks, same black dress clinging to her frame, her head tilted, and in that warped, dim light, I swear her jaw unhinged slightly, like it wasn't made for speaking. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice gurgling like it came through water. "I didn't want this," I shouted, my voice bouncing back in metallic distortion. "Just let me leave." Her eyes flicked to the wall. "Then give it back." I froze. "Give what back?" She lifted one dripping hand and pointed. "To my pocket. The note. Don't go below." I ripped it out, held it in front of me like a shield. That's just paper. Somebody slipped it under my door." Her scream cut me off. Not loud. Low, guttural, like the hull groaning under pressure. And then the corridor behind her filled. Dozens of people. All the faces I'd passed in the dining halls, the theaters, the pool deck. Families, couples, solo travelers. Only now, they were pale, bloated, dripping seawater. Their mouths opened in perfect unison. A sound rolled out of them, like waves crashing underwater, mixed with voices calling for help. I backed away until my shoulders hit a steel hatch. It was marked, "Engine Access, Authorized Crew Only." It wasn't locked. I yanked it open and stumbled inside. The engine room should have been deafening. Instead, it was silent. Giant turbines stood still, slick with algae. Chains dangled from the ceiling, swaying though there was no draft. Pools of water spread across the floor, perfectly still except where bubbles occasionally rose. And in the center of the room, a table, rust-eaten metal, with a ledger sitting on top. I stepped closer, every instinct screaming to run. The ledger was open to a page filled with neat names. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Passenger names. Every few lines, some were crossed out in heavy black ink. And at the bottom, written fresh in wet strokes, was mine. Eric Lane, cabin 723, crossed out. I stumbled back, chest tightening. That wasn't possible. I was alive. I was standing there. The girl appeared at my side without a sound. She leaned close, hair brushing my cheek, cold water soaking my shirt. "You never boarded," she whispered. "You drowned before they let you on." My breath froze. That's not true. Her smile widened. Water streamed from the corners of her mouth. "Then why does no one remember you?" Footsteps thundered behind me. The drowned passengers poured into the room, filling every space, their faces blank, eyes leaking seawater. I backed against the table. My hand brushed the ledger, and then, like instinct, I picked up the pen. I don't remember deciding. I don't remember writing. But when I looked down, a fresh line was there. Eric Lane, returned. The crowd fell silent. Every single figure turned their head toward me, and they smiled. I woke up in my cabin, dry, sunlight through the porthole. The ship felt alive again, engine humming, distant laughter echoing through the halls. For a second I thought it was all a nightmare, but my cabin door was gone. No handle, no seam, just a blank, seamless wall where the exit should have been. And when I looked down, the carpet was soaked through. If you're listening to this, if somehow this recording makes it off the ship, don't come looking for me. Don't even try to imagine what below means. Just subscribe, because if my story ends here, someone else has to keep telling these things before they're erased. Because once the ship decides you never boarded, you're never leaving.